The Galactic Council's archives listed Kepler 438c as absolutely uninhabitable in 17 different languages, each translation somehow making it sound more deadly than the last. The planet's surface temperature swung from -200 Celsius during its 18-hour nights to over 400 during its scorching days. Acid storms raged for months at a time. The atmosphere was a toxic cocktail of methane and sulfur compounds that would dissolve most known materials within hours. Even the radiation levels were lethal to every catalogued species in the galaxy, which was exactly why Commander Sarah Chen thought it was perfect. "You cannot be serious," Ambassador Vexhai of the Zephyrian Republic chittered, his forearms gesticulating wildly. "The Environmental Assessment Committee has marked this world as a Class X death trap. No sentient being has ever survived more than 3 standard rotations on its surface." Sarah leaned back in her chair aboard the orbital research station, watching the swirling brown and yellow clouds of Kepler 438c through the viewport. "Has anyone actually tried to live there permanently?" "Of course not." The ambassador's crystalline skin shifted to an alarmed shade of orange. "It would be suicide. So you've tested it with probes and drones, run simulations, but never actually attempted long-term habitation." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting." Dr. Kethmore, the station's Altarian chief scientist, floated closer on his repulsor disk. "Commander Chen, with respect to your species' reputation for creativity, the mathematics are quite clear. The environmental factors alone would kill any known life form within days." "Any known life form," Sarah repeated. "But humans aren't exactly known for being predictable, are we?" 3 months later, Sarah stood in the cargo bay of her modified atmospheric descent vehicle, checking her equipment one final time. The stubborn mule, as she'd nicknamed the ship, was packed with everything she'd managed to requisition, trade for, or, in a few cases, creatively acquire from the various species represented on the station. The heat-resistant ceramics came from the Vulcanoids who used them in their forge worlds. The atmospheric processors were Zephyrian technology, designed for terraforming, but repurposed for survival. The structural framework was built from Terran steel, because sometimes the old ways were the best ways, reinforced with crystalline composite plating that could theoretically withstand acid baths. "Last chance to reconsider, Commander," crackled Dr. Kethmore's voice through the comm. "The entire scientific community is watching this. If you perish, it will only confirm what we already know." "And if I don't?" Sarah asked, sealing her environmental suit. Silence stretched across the communication channel. The descent through Kepler 438c's atmosphere was like riding a meteorite through hell. The stubborn mule's hull groaned and sparked as acid droplets ate at the outer plating. The temperature readings spiked so high that Sarah's instruments briefly gave up and displayed error messages. When she finally broke through the cloud layer, the landscape below looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares: twisted rock formations, bubbling acid lakes, and geysers of toxic steam shooting kilometers into the air. Sarah smiled. Now this is a challenge. Finding the right location took 2 weeks of surveying. She needed somewhere with relatively stable ground, natural windbreaks, and access to the mineral deposits she'd need for long-term sustainability. Eventually, she settled on a plateau overlooking a valley of crystallized sulfur formations. The view was actually quite beautiful, in an apocalyptic sort of way. The foundation was the hardest part. Working in her environmental suit during the brief twilight periods when the temperature dropped to merely scorching, Sarah laid a base of interlocking ceramic tiles designed to expand and contract with the extreme temperature variations. The walls came next, a triple-layer system with Vulcanoid ceramics on the outside, insulation in the middle, and good old-fashioned steel on the inside. The atmospheric processor was her lifeline. Rather than trying to make the whole planet breathable, she created a closed-loop system that filtered and recycled the air inside her habitat. The solar collectors, modified Zephyrian technology, absorbed energy during the day and stored it in crystalline batteries for the long nights. Water was actually easier than she'd expected. The acid storms, while deadly, could be neutralized and purified. Sarah set up collection arrays that funneled the liquid into her processing system, where a series of filters and chemical treatments turned it into something she could actually drink. Food was the real innovation. Sarah had brought seeds, not the genetically modified crops used on most worlds, but hardy earth varieties that her grandfather had grown during the resource wars, potatoes, soybeans, and wheat varieties that had been bred to survive in contaminated soil. With careful hydroponics and artificial lighting, they actually thrived in the controlled environment of her habitat. By the end of her first year, Sarah had not only survived, but had built a comfortable 3-room dwelling complete with a small garden, a workshop, and even a rudimentary communications array. She sent regular updates to the orbital station, each transmission causing more consternation among the scientific community. "It's impossible," Dr. Kethmore muttered during one of their weekly conversations. "The environmental readings from your location should have killed you dozens of times over." "Maybe," Sarah replied, tending to her potato plants. "But you know what humans are really good at? We're good at making impossible things work anyway." Ambassador Vexhai visited during her second year, arriving in a heavily shielded diplomatic vessel. He spent exactly 47 minutes on the surface before retreating to his ship, citing environmental concerns. But Sarah noticed he'd spent most of those 47 minutes staring at her house with something approaching awe. "How?" was all he managed to say. Sarah shrugged, offering him a cup of tea made from leaves she'd started growing in her expanded greenhouse. "We don't see impossible. We just see a really interesting problem that nobody's solved yet." The word spread. Within 3 years, xenobiologists from across the galaxy were requesting permission to study Sarah's habitat. Engineers wanted to understand her adaptation techniques. Philosophers debated the implications of her success. But Sarah wasn't done. By year 4, she'd expanded her dwelling into a proper compound. By year 6, she was hosting scientific conferences in her main hall. By year 10, the first permanent research station was being constructed in the valley below her plateau. The Galactic Council officially reclassified Kepler 438c as conditionally habitable with appropriate human engineering in their updated archives. It was the first time in galactic history that a world's classification had been changed based on the actions of a single individual. Sarah Chen didn't see it as anything special. She'd just found a nice quiet place to build a home and refused to let a little thing like a completely hostile environment stop her. After all, she was human. That was what they did.